the two things that, oh, thank you for the recording. And the two things that should not be spoken to right now are the new Vista High School proposed site development. That's to replace the existing building at 720th Street. And then our other public hearing item that you should not speak to right now is 5405 Spine Road. Sorry, I got a kiddo in the background. Anything else you're welcome to speak to now, but please do not speak to Spine Road or New Vista at this time. And if you would like to comment during public participation now about anything else, please raise your hand and we'll call on you and we'd love to hear from you.
All right, each person will have 3 minutes. So first up, we have Lynn Siegel. Please go ahead, Lynn. You have 3 minutes.
Can someone else?
We can hear you.
Can someone else go before me? Can I be last?
Sorry, you're the only hand raised, Lynn. These are your
Okay.
3 minutes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Okay, what I wanted to say here is that you need to balance jobs, housing. And as Mark knows, I wish this could be more iterative because I need to ask what the term is for that special kind of parking where you share the parking. There's a name for it. And I know Mark knows it and he could say it right now, but he can't talk during my time, even if I offer him the time. This is so sad. So sad that it's not iterative because we're all working together here. And that's the way we expand and grow is by learning from each other. So it's sad. But the kind of parking, for example, at the 300 square foot 2206 Pearl, that situation, it would be solved very easily with truly multi-generational cooperative housing. And I don't mean standard communal co-op housing, hippie type housing. I mean serious housing, mainstream housing for people with 3 bedrooms, with 4 bedrooms, with 10 bedrooms, with whatever size communal household you want, or cooperative is a better term, like a kibbutz. Just something that's cooperative. It's so much energy efficient. It's so much more, less drywall, but there's plenty of private space. Anything that you design in Boulder of new build should be designed around this kind of a model, having plenty of storage since there's going to be different families. And maybe there's going to be families with singles, with grandparents, with old generations to take care of each other's kids, to take care of each other's parking, and to take care of each other's driving needs. One person would need to have the giant Amazon vans that they drive all over these days, instead of each household having one. It's so much more practical. And when you're living cooperatively, you naturally manage the parking and manage the commuting and manage what cars you have between yourselves. Otherwise, you're paying some other guy a bunch of money at 300 square feet, 2206 Pearl. It's like very sad when that happens. And the other thing is we need services. And the more services we have, of course, the more housing we're going to need to pick up for that because it's low income. So we need to balance jobs, housing, because otherwise it's a constant cycle of despair. Done.
Madam Chair, I'm just going to respond to Lynn real quick. The term is SUMP, which stands for shared, unbundled, managed, and paid in reference to parking. So the city advocates for SUMP, shared, unbundled, managed, and paid.
And I think she might also be referring to tandem parking spaces where 2 cars park and like nose to end, and then you have to manage who's coming in and who's going out. I'm not sure if that's what Lynn was talking about, but it might be.
Thank you. Thanks for chiming in. And there are no other hands raised. And I just wanted to quickly make a plug for a community engagement opportunity tomorrow night for the Boulder Junction Phase 2 project. It's at the Junkyard Social Club People who are interested in the future of that neighborhood can stop by between 4 and 6. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our general public participation. Minutes for approval. So I think April 4th, we didn't have any big comments on. Laura, I saw that you had some pretty extensive comments on March 21st. Are you hoping to hear back on some of those questions before we move to approve those? Should we push those to a later date, or how are you feeling, Laura?
Well, thank you for asking, Lisa. My big question was just that the notes don't seem to capture the general comments, that we are often offered an opportunity to make general comments that are not a response to a specific key issue that staff have outlined. And it looks like from what Devin had said over email that there may be some discussion happening on staff's end about what is appropriate to include in the notes and what is not. And so if it is not appropriate to include general comments in the notes, it's good to know that so that we can manage our comments appropriately. And I'd love to hear about it. And I see that Brad has his hand up.
Brad, go ahead.
I'd be happy to elaborate during matters on this, although I can also tell you very quickly that we appreciate those comments. We're going to have some internal conversation about that. We haven't had the chance to, just given the time frame. But we will plan to do that, or we have plans to do that, and we'll be happy to report out at a future planning board meeting.
So my instinct then, Laura, and I mean, someone else speak up, whether it's staff or a planning board member, is to kind of put a pin in March 21st, just to kind of see where that falls out, and if we end up adding some stuff back in or not, or whatever. And then to go ahead and approve April 4th.
I support your suggestion, Lisa.
Okay, great. I would entertain a motion.
I will move that we approve is it April 4th? April 4th meeting minutes.
I second.
All right, so moved by Laura and seconded by Mark. Although I'll do a roll call vote. Mark?
Sorry, aye.
Laura?
Aye.
ML?
Aye.
And Georgie?
Yes.
And Kurt?
Yes.
All right, unanimously approved by, and I say aye as well, so unanimously approved by board members present. All right, and I think our next order is 2 call-ups. And forgive me, do I usually describe what these are, or is that something that staff does?
I believe that you would normally read this.
Okay, cool. Then let me look at my notes and I will. I just had a moment where I was like, what do I do? Okay, so the first potential call-up is a final plat to replat a 6.78 acre property into 3 lots and 2 outlots. The lots are described. I'm not going to read all of the description of that because it just gets a little bit particular. But these would be used for stormwater detention, water quality and drainage purposes. The replat includes a dedication of Hibiscus Avenue and Hawthorne rights-of-way and new easements. And the replat is consistent with the conditions of approval associated with site review case LUR 2021-00037 for the Diagonal Plaza redevelopment. Has everyone had the chance to look at that call-up, and would anyone like to call that up? Kurt, I see that you have a question or comment.
Yeah, I just have a question. I was trying to understand about outlots, and Wikipedia says an outlot is a lot that can't possibly be built on, which doesn't seem to be quite the case here. Is there a legal distinction between a lot and an outlot?
I can't speak to the legal terminology, but we do not typically see development on outlots. There's 2 outlots associated with the Diagonal Plaza development. So outlot A is actually going to be the common open space for the development with no structures. And then outlot B would actually be the stormwater detention.
And so why are these separate lots? slots slash outlots as opposed to just part of the other lots?
It's typical in a development, particularly of this size, that if there's a number of different lots that might be in different ownership, that an outlot would be created for the open space so that it basically gets a homeowners association or common ownership interest gets created to maintain that outlot. Same goes for like stormwater detention facilities.
Okay, great. That's all I have. I have no interest in calling this up.
That was a great question. Thank you, Kurt. I learned some stuff there too. Anyone else have any questions or comments or desire to call up this item? Kind of scrolling back and forth looking for folks. All right, seeing none. Our next potential call up is a site review amendment to amend the Orchard PUD to expand the property at 1576 Hawthorne Avenue to include adjacent common area. So I was fortunate enough to get a little background on this one from staff, which you probably also saw in the packet. My understanding of it is that this was originally a common area described as going to be a play area that was owned by the HOA, and it's at the end of the PUD, and was never kind of given proper access or properly developed. So in order to get there, people would have to walk down various paths that go across yards to get there. There are now fences in the way, and it's kind of this weird isolated parcel of land. And that all parties involved, the applicant who's interested in taking over part of it, and the HOA is more than happy to deed it over. And the idea is that it'll basically just function as it already is, which is sort of like a larger backyard. Staff, feel free to correct me if I misdescribed anything. And same question, does anyone have any questions about this or an interest in calling this item up? Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I raised my real hand versus my virtual hand, so should I keep going, or I see Kurt has?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, oh, sorry,
Okay.
Kurt, I'll call on you second.
So I'm going to call this up. And that may not be a popular thing, and it might be a bit surprising, but I'm going to call it up, and I'm going to tell everyone why. And I think this is important. I value what public and community property brings to our collective lives. I am also greatly concerned by the privatization of public and communal spaces. And this transference of public and communal spaces, property, lands happens and is kind of under siege on a scale both large and small all the time. And I know this is a very small thing, but here are my 5 reasons for calling this up. This is an example, albeit small, of privatization of public and community space. It is a case of slow and quiet adverse possession that we are facilitating. One might say that there is no adversity here. I counter that there is, but it is atypical in that it is the children, the kids who didn't get to use this space, and the kids that won't get to use this space and that don't have a particular voice in this matter. Third, consensus among neighbors is not a reason, nor is it enough to justify a decision. I can't simply agree with my neighbors and say, we won't let green cars park on the street. Consensus does not make a decision right or moral or illegal. Fourth, staff's memo is, I find, insufficient in addressing, and in fact does not show at all, the way fences, buildings, signage have created barriers to what was originally proposed as a public space and a communal asset of this kind of innovative little property. Again, is adversely possessing of a community asset. Fifth, we should not be in the habit of glossing over failures to meet approved plans simply because of the passage of time and the erosion of people's expectations. So I may ultimately vote to approve this change, but I will not make that vote without additional information gathering, examination, and consideration by this board and staff. So those are my reasons for calling it up.
Thanks, Mark. And staff, forgive me for not remembering, or any other member of the board, feel free to answer this question as well. But do we need a second, or can any one of us can call this up, right? And then it goes to discussion? Am I right? Brad, Carl, Chandler.
It's any one board member.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, anyone can call it up.
Great. And so do we now hear from staff or ask questions, or what are our next procedural moves?
You can ask questions, but otherwise, I'll just schedule it for a public hearing. I believe within the next 60 days.
Kurt, I know that you haven't gotten the chance to speak yet. Would you like to speak now and then?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Mark, for that very articulate description, and I share some of your concerns. I don't know where I would come down, but I certainly, I had some of those same qualms. One thing that as staff is preparing this, I'd like to understand if incorporating this into the existing lot 6 would then change the amount of buildable floor area on lot 6 under the compatible development rules. So that's just something that could be hopefully addressed in the memo. Thank you.
That's a great question, Kurt. Thank you. Brad, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, and I was just going to remind the board that now that it's called up, any substantive discussion would be reserved for the call-up hearing.
That makes sense. All right, folks. So then we'll, this has been called up, and it sounds to me like we should move on, and hopefully that'll make it onto the schedule, as Chandler said, sometime in the next 60 or so days. So thank you. And looking back at my little outline I made myself. Mark went off my outline. That's okay, that's good for me. All right, and we're moving on, I believe, now to our public hearing items. The first of which is a review and comment on our proposed site development plan for New Vista High School. And this is a bit of an unusual opportunity for us to provide feedback because of BVSD's status as kind of a sovereign entity, and I'm sure staff will speak to that in their presentation. So staff, feel free to take it away if you are ready.
All right, wonderful. Share my screen.
Shannon, you're pretty muted. Something funny is happening with your mic.
Let me scoot up a little closer here. Can you hear me any better?
That is clear. Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. I will try to speak up. I do have a soft voice, so I get in trouble with that. Good evening, board. Let me just get my presentation already. So for tonight's discussion, I'll be presenting a unique item, as you mentioned, for the board to review and comment on. This is for the proposed site development plan for New Vista High School, proposing to replace the existing school building at 720th Street. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Shannon Muller. I'm with the planning department for the city of Boulder. I'll briefly cover the information in staff's memo, including the purpose of this review, the feedback received to date, existing site conditions, surrounding context and history, description of the proposal, and some key issues for discussion. So the purpose of this item is for the planning board to review and comment on a site development plan to replace the existing New Vista High School with a new building. And this is consistent with the Colorado Revised Statutes under 2232-124, which is listed on this slide. This state law requires the Board of Education of a school district to submit a site development plan for review and comment to the Planning Commission or governing body of a municipality prior to construction. This means that this particular review is being done pursuant to this state statute, and it's not being done through the city's typical processes. State law doesn't provide any further description of the review process or any specific review criteria for the review and comment. So staff has approached this review similar to what we would do for a concept plan review. So the memo in the board packet and this slide include the typical concept plan review and comment guidelines that are pulled from section 9 to 13G, items 1 through 8. So generally, staff has focused the memo and this presentation on policy considerations in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan because it establishes the vision for Boulder. As you would be familiar with, in our typical concept plan review and comment, no approval or denial is being taken tonight on the project. The board can review and comment on the proposal, but it's not a decision-making body on the item. The school district isn't required to undergo a site review process, and it's not subject to our typical city land use code or processes because the construction, remodeling, and renovation is permitted through the state of Colorado and not through the city. So this review and comment outlined here is done pursuant to state statutes, as I mentioned. So there are no mailings or sign postings required, but there have been public input opportunities as the process to construct a new school facility has been ongoing for a few years. In November 2022, voters approved bond measure 5A, which included specific language regarding replacing the 7-year-old New Vista High School with a modern, energy-efficient building. And in 2021 and 2022, the school district held design advisory team meetings with opportunities for public comment on the design of the project. And it's at its meeting on May 3rd of this year, the Landmarks Board also provided the statement on this slide regarding the proposal, encouraging documentation of the buildings and referencing historic preservation staff's comments, which are included in the board packet under attachment B. So now that we've gone through the purpose of the item and feedback received to date, we'll move to the site and surrounding context. This is a 12.5-acre property located northwest of the intersection of Broadway and Baseline. It contains the existing New Vista High School building, parking lot, and recreational fields. The underlying BVCB land use designation is primarily public, which reflects the current high school use. There is a small bit of land designated high-density residential in one area of the site. Since this has been part of the school property for many decades, it's not clear why there's another designation on the site, but the site is primarily designated public, which would be the appropriate designation. The zoning on the property is RH5, residential high 5, and in this zoning, public schools are allowed by right. The property is adjacent to 20th Street, Baseline Road, and Broadway. One point of access to the site exists from Baseline into the existing parking area south of the building. The primary building entrance fronts on 20th Street, and there are various sports fields and courts on the property. The high point of the site is located at the southwest corner, and it slopes down toward Broadway. It's been developed for about 70 years as a school. There are some mature trees on the site, and there are views of the Flatirons visible across the property. New Vista High School currently serves about 330 students in grades 9 through 12. It was originally opened in 1954 as Baseline Junior High School to serve the needs of the growing community post-World War II. The building was designed by prominent Boulder architect James M. Hunter, with a later addition by Hobart Wagner between 1955 and 1964. And there's additional historical information and images in attachment D to the staff memo. The surrounding area is characterized by a mix of uses. To the east across Broadway is the University of Colorado main campus. To the southeast, there's condo and apartment buildings and fire station number 2. To the south, there are single-family detached homes. And to the west and north, there are a mix of apartment buildings, duplexes, and condos. The site is served by a number of nearby transit routes, primarily running along Broadway and Baseline near the site. These include many routes, including the 204, 225, Dash, Skip, Bound, AB1, Flatiron's Flyer, the Lions Flyer, the city's Park to Park shuttle to Chautauqua, and the Hop to Chautauqua shuttle offered on concert nights. There's an on-street bike lane that exists on the north side of Baseline Road, and there's a multi-use path present along Broadway. There's a primarily detached sidewalk along Baseline and an attached sidewalk along 20th. The city's transportation master plan depicts a planned multi-use path connection across the northern edge of the subject property. It's shown in a dashed green line. It's a little difficult to see. If you can see my cursor, I'm following it along the edge there. The low stress street walk and bike network plan in the transportation master plan also depicts a bike lane along Baseline with a preference for a buffered bike lane. So now that we've talked about the site, context, and a bit of history, we'll move to tonight's proposal. So this is a proposal for a replacement of the existing building with a new approximately 74,000 square foot two-story building. The school district has determined that the existing building is no longer able to serve the needs of the high school population. The replacement building is to be located next to the existing building, and following completion of the new building, the existing building would be demolished. The proposed building design has two wings connected at an oblique angle. It includes spaces such as an auditorium, dining area, lab, fitness, and art studio spaces, classrooms and offices, and outdoor patio learning spaces. A parking area with about 115 spaces would be located at the southwest corner of the property, and a new one-way pickup and drop-off lane access would be provided from Baseline Road, and it would exit onto 20th Street, whereas currently pickups and drop-offs for the site are done curbside along 20th and Baseline. Parking for bikes would include 52 bike parking spaces in front of the building, along with areas for seating and picnic tables, and the design includes maintaining the sports field at the rear of the property and adding a relocated basketball court. The proposal would generally maintain the existing sidewalk conditions, including the primarily detached walk along Baseline and the attached walk along 20th. The proposal is a two-story building. As I mentioned, the design is clad with a mix of CMU veneer, metal panels, and aluminum storefront systems. So lastly, I'll move to the key issues for discussion. So as noted earlier, the memo in the packet and this presentation are based on the typical concept plan review and comment guidelines in 9213G, and in particular, the policy considerations in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan. So the first key issue for the board to discuss is whether the proposal is overall consistent with the goals, objectives, and recommendations of the BVCP. Staff identified the BVCP policies and items that might be relevant to the proposal, and I'll go through those next. So I tried to group these into different groupings. Overall, staff found that the proposal for land use of a school on the site and the continued use of the site as a school is supported by both the primary underlying land use designation of public on the land use map and by policy 2.10 preservation and support of residential neighborhoods, where the school has been a part of the neighborhood for about 70 years. In relation to deconstruction of the existing building, in support of policy 2.27, staff strongly recommends that the buildings be documented prior to deconstruction. As noted in the historic preservation comments, historic photographs and social history could be integrated into an interactive exhibit as part of the new school. Additionally, in support of policy 4.09, staff recommends diverting building materials from the landfill that could be reused, donated, or recycled, consistent with some of the city's adopted policies and ordinances. In relation to accessibility and transportation for the site, the updates to the site provides the opportunity to improve the physical design of the site for people, complete missing links, plan accessibility to schools, and address access and traffic challenges that are often associated with schools in a coordinated manner. The proposal provides for a new building and site design that will address many accessibility challenges that are inherent with older buildings. And it incorporates a new drop-off and pickup lane that's intended to alleviate on-street congestion. Staff also recommends that the transportation improvements and considerations listed in the memo under item 9213G, item 5, be incorporated into the proposal, including incorporating the multi-use path connection at the north end of the site, updating sidewalks along 20th and Baseline to meet current standards, ensuring the bus pull-out stop on Baseline meets current RTD standards, and ensuring that site accesses meet the city's design and construction standards. In terms of the environment, as a new building on an existing infill site that will serve the community for multiple decades, the site provides a great opportunity to provide an environmentally sensitive and energy efficient design. The new school building is intended to be an energy efficient design, so this is consistent with policy 4.08, and the design will provide new landscaping and trees on the site consistent with policy 2.38. Staff recommends the proposal incorporate street trees consistent with the city's typical minimum requirements along the street right-of-way to support a high-quality public realm and reduce the urban heat island effect as much as possible. And should any outdoor lighting be provided, staff recommends it be dark sky compliant. And lastly, in terms of the design of the site, the updated site and building design present the opportunity for the proposal to provide an enhanced design as it relates to the neighborhood context, public realm, and the overall building design. The site's relationship to the public realm is apparent in the design, which creates a more defined entry point and a front gathering space, and could be further enhanced with the transportation improvements mentioned earlier. While the proposed building materials are typical for a public facility of this nature, staff recommends the materials be further refined by incorporating authentic and human scale materials rather than the primarily CMU that's proposed. Moving on to the second key issue. The second key issue is a procedural option relating to making a formal motion on the item. If the board wishes to provide a formal letter to the school district board of directors, in addition to providing verbal feedback at this hearing tonight, the board could make a motion for staff to draft a letter to the board of directors incorporating the city's comments and any specific requested changes. There is no requirement for the board to make a motion on this item. The board can provide feedback to the school district who is here tonight in the typical review and comment verbal format during the hearing. The board does have the option to direct staff to draft a formal letter and could make specific requests if it wishes to do so. So that concludes my presentation. The BVSD staff and design team is here, and we'll also have a presentation and will also be available for questions.
Laurel, I see that your hand is raised.
Yes, apologies for jumping in here. I think it might also be helpful to make sure that there's any disclosures or anything before we continue too far on any conflict of interest.
The thing that I said I would do and didn't. Yeah, does anyone have any disclosures?
I meant to say it earlier, so apologies for that, but just before we continue on.
Thank you for holding me accountable, Laurel. Yes, does anyone have any disclosures particular to this project before we proceed? Perhaps since it's been a little while since we've done disclosures, Laurel, could you remind us, I know obviously a fiduciary relationship would be one, but I think there's also something about how close you live to a property.
Yeah,
if that's top of mind, would you mind sharing that again?
Yeah, sure. If you live within the normal 600 feet of notification, it's helpful to disclose that if you have any fiduciary duties or any other sort of conflict of interest. If you're unsure, you're welcome to share, and I can walk you through any sort of potential issues there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laurel.
Yeah.
Any such concerns or potential concerns to disclose? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to questions for staff. Please raise your hand if you have any. Laura, I think I saw your hand go up first. Go ahead.
This might be more appropriately addressed to the applicant, but I was wondering about the the shuttle service to Chautauqua and whether that would be able to continue during construction and deconstruction. Am I correct in thinking that this is the place where people park on weekends and holidays to try to get a shuttle to Chautauqua?
That's my understanding. I think the representative is able to address that when they have a chance to talk.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. And by the way, thank you for your presentation. Very informative. Really appreciate it.
And I have another question for staff. So this bond measure that we passed, and this will relate to a question I ask of the applicant later, but the bond measure that was passed by City of Boulder, are those funds allocated in such a way that they can only be used and must be used for this usage? That is, that they must be used for, they're approved for and must be used for this New Vista site, and that was kind of how it was structured? Or would those funds potentially be usable elsewhere? And I'll explain what I'm talking about later. And I'm not even sure my idea is a good one. I'm just curious about the legalities of the bond measure.
So my understanding is the bond measure that was passed was related specifically to BVSD, so the city would have no bearing in how that's used. It would be BVSD would probably be able to answer that question.
Okay, cool. I'll ask again when we get to the applicant. All right, any other questions for staff at this time? Looking back and forth, and feel free to, oh, Kurt, I think I just saw your hand. Go ahead.
I just have one process question. So the CRS 2232-124-1A talks about the planning commission or governing body may request a public hearing before the Board of Education relating to the proposed site location or site development plan. So I just want to confirm that that would be an option to us. You talked about potentially sending a letter, but it seems like this is slightly different. So I just want to understand what is involved with that.
Yeah, that's my understanding that is an option as well. Laurel, feel free to jump in if I'm misunderstanding anything. I don't believe that was an option that staff is recommending at this time, but it could certainly be one that we could talk about. And if you wanted to pursue that, that would be an option.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with
can
Shannon.
jump in too, Laurel. Maybe we can tag team here a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
That certainly is an option under state law. We have approached this in the spirit of cooperation and coordination with one of our, fellow local government entities in here. Really, I don't think the school board anticipates that, and they are not quite the same design review board, of course, that either council or planning board is. So that has been anticipated mostly at the staff level, but that is an option. We don't tend to see that around the state, just as a matter of point.
All right, any further questions for staff? All right, let's move on to the applicant presentation, please. And I think that will be from Chris Stopenhagen, is that right?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Stopenhagen. I'm the Executive Director of Bond Planning and Construction. And really quick, do you want me to go right into the presentation or address the questions that have been brought up?
I would say presentation first, and then maybe circle back to any questions that aren't already addressed in the presentation at the end.
You betcha. Just a moment here, I'll pull everything up. All right, thanks for having us. Put together a presentation just to kind of go over, and Shannon, thank you, you covered some of this, but just to give you guys a little bit more detail of the working groups and the design summary of how we came to this project. So it was really back in the good old days of 2020, late 2020, when a working group was established to discuss and recommend on the following options. There was an intent in the bond for the prior bond, that we move forward and address the scope of work and budget that really involved kind of renovating, updating spaces. We really found in digging into that the other option we have is to expand scope to correct deficiencies and modernize the school. And the new construction to replace the existing facility was our other option. So the members that made up this committee were school leadership, teachers, students, parents, and community members, and an architecture team that came together and met in a timeline basically late 2020 through February, where they made recommendations. So a project history and overview was analyzed, current site conditions and restrictions were analyzed, visioning and goal setting was set, and we reviewed an overall timeline of what this looked like. So recommendations were made in February of 21 to the Board of Education. Little background on the existing condition, as Shannon pointed out, where it's located, Baseline and Broadway. We did do traffic studies and an overall site study, like I said. So how traffic moves, what the restrictions of the current site are, what the views of the Flatirons contain, how we preserve this with the community and keep that engagement and historical aspect with the building. We had site deficiencies that were identified throughout. We have structural issues that create hazards, asphalt deterioration, and really the way it's set up now is we have a bit of a bottleneck that occurs a lot on the site. So water infiltration issues are prominent around the building, the perimeter. We have structural elements that are cracking, groundwater that's causing structural issues along the west edge of the building. And you see this inside of the building, these effects. So significant structural issues, including sagging on the floor, separation of brick interior and exterior. We have single pane windows, so it's not a very energy efficient building, being that its age, and with several additions that have been added to it. We have poor lighting quality. We have aging mechanical systems that will be costly to replace if we were to renovate. And we have numerous ADA issues that would need to be addressed. Additional interior deficiencies, existing space. As Shannon said, this was designed as Baseline Middle School back in the 50s. The spaces don't allow really for the desired program needs or modern educational programming. We have STEM programs that are in existing locker rooms. We have space used for locker rooms that's really storage right now. So this led to the visioning. What is this look like for the future New Vista and Boulder Valley School District to keep providing optimal learning environments for the students? So we started with what's important. The school allows for student choice. It's got alternative and unique programs for learning opportunities. It allows for innovation and collaboration in ways traditional schools don't, and align with a lot of really modern day curriculum. The building originally was designed, like I said, for a middle school, so it's not equipped really for the program needs, and we want it to be future ready. We have deep ties to the integration with the community, and we want to honor that. So in the design, we do have a space designated for display to honor that history and the community ties that exist. And the school embraces equity. So the design includes universal access to facilities, public transit, paths, and spaces and seating throughout. So our options and considerations through all this, really student impact, safety and sustainability, and longevity. So again, going back to our options overview, proceed with the original bond scope, go through extensive renovation, plus the original scope of work, a new building on the current site or a new building on a new site. We developed a matrix really to analyze this. So option one, to proceed with the original scope, we have the least upfront cost investment on that. Ongoing operations and maintenance is the most costly. The impact to students is the greatest, and we don't really accomplish maintaining or meeting educational goals. And so health, safety, and sustainability really doesn't check a box there, and we have the least building life expectancy. Doing extensive renovation, again, we have a lot of impact to students, potentially relocating them. Within this, we also have a lot of asbestos abatement that has to occur that would be in multiple phases, creating additional health and safety hazards. We increase our building life expectancy slightly by this option. New building on the current site checks really all the boxes, and we have a very similar cost to the extensive renovation by putting a new building in there on the current site. So really excels in meeting the educational goals, health, safety, and sustainability checks the boxes. In the new building on a new site, we just didn't have a site really designated for that, and then we lose that connection to the community that we've really heard is important to the surrounding neighborhood. So sustainability design focus. So much like Boulder, we have green building principles that we've adopted. The board has adopted it to all our new building projects and updating and renovation projects. So some highlights of this design specifically I wanted to point out is we have a condensing gas boiler that's 94% efficient and energy recovery RTUs that are designed into this. Our lighting power is 40 to 60% less than 21 energy code minimums. Our design is approximately 26% better than code baseline for annual energy costs. Light pollution reduction is a key focus, and we will remain dark sky compliant. Water use reduction is key in this. We have thoughtful landscaping, and what that water use looks like throughout the building has been taken into account. We have advanced energy metering designed into the building, and our focus is on campus safety, maintaining views through campus, and of course, views of the Flatirons that will be maintained. And with that, I will open it up to your discussion and questions.
Thank you so much. Folks, please raise your hand if you've got questions. I have some, but I'll see what comes up from other people first. Amel, I think I just saw your hand go up. Go ahead. And you are muted, Amel. I did that earlier in a meeting.
I unmuted myself and instead I muted myself. Sorry. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. I appreciate the input there. So I'm going to just ask one of my many questions to get started here. You briefly talked about that you presented it to the Board of Education. Mm-hmm. What was their response?
Approval of going forward with the new building.
So of the options, it was that option number 3, reuse the existing site and put a new building on there?
Right. It addresses the student needs. It keeps people safe throughout. It keeps us from displacing the students because they can stay in the existing building as it is. And the cost analysis of extensive renovation and the health and safety risks just didn't provide adequate savings for us to explore that further.
Great. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
I will ask my further questions after the rest of the board has a chance.
Great, thank you, Amel. Kurt, please go ahead.
Hi, Kurt.
Yeah, just one question. You mentioned congestion on the site, which I assume you mean motor vehicle congestion. Is that what you were talking about?
There is motor vehicle congestion. There's also, with Chautauqua, that relationship, Laura, is important to us in the building with them, and that will be maintained. That shuttle will remain in use and have access to that. But that in particular, my understanding is it makes a U-turn inside the site to come in, and so not only that, but deliveries and things of that sort provide a little bit of just site congestion. Yes, and so we feel. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, finish. Sorry, go ahead and finish.
We feel the new design allows for much better flow through the site and also takes into account what that queue backup will look like, how we routed it through there. So we have additional parking spaces. We have additional pathway through that as far as the length that it kind of curves through for drop off in buses. So we do feel we've addressed through traffic studies that's going to decrease.
And so what transportation demand management strategies do you use to deal with that congestion currently?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
What transportation demand management strategies do you use to deal with that congestion currently?
I guess, can you elaborate on that so I understand?
Well, the city has a large suite of TDM strategies that we advocate for, and, you know, developers, we require most developers to use a variety of strategies in a variety of situations, especially if parking is constrained and so on. And so maybe the answer is none, which is certainly, that's an answer. But, you know, ideally, we try to limit, we try to reduce the amount of vehicle miles traveled in the city. We try to reduce the amount of single occupant vehicle use. And so, and especially if there's a congestion problem, it seems like the first step, rather than adding more parking, might be to address it using TDM strategies. But
Yeah,
okay,
no,
I think I got the answer that I need for now.
And I understand what you're saying, and maybe congestion is the wrong word. It's really kind of just the restrictions that the current site has. And so I think that just with the flow and stuff, and we do have, you know, busing, we encourage public transportation. We did hire an outside consultant for traffic studies in this to analyze what's the best use of the site and everything. So I don't know if I'm answering your question specifically, but we have done a lot of analysis on this.
Okay, well, maybe I'll follow up on that later. Thank you.
And we do have consultants here that could maybe speak more to this if you'd like us to do a follow-up to your question.
Thank you, Kurt. We'll circle back to that too. Mark, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to follow on some of Kurt's questions. I'm going to try to keep them to kind of easy answers and then save comments for comment time. So the total number of students expected at this site in most years is what?
We currently have 330, and we're kind of maintaining that right now. We do feel that, new building may attract others to the programs that New Vista does offer. But 330, I think, is where we're holding right now.
And then approximate number of teachers and staff combined.
I'd have to revisit that, Mark, honestly, and get back to you.
Okay. But like maybe in a 60 to 90 range sort of thing, or?
Yeah, I think you're probably accurate there, yes.
Okay. All right. When I read, I think the total number of proposed parking spaces was 157, but I had to do some calculating and estimating or reading of the plans. And so the total number of bike spaces I saw was 26. Is that way off base, or what is that number? Do you know?
We have 115, I believe is what it was, parking spaces. I can double check that math. And the bike spaces, we do have additional that BVSD is providing on the north side as well. Total number, I will need to confirm with you on that.
Okay. And so I'm referring to the future condition, not currently on bike and car spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Anyway, I was looking at the plans. As best I could calculate is 26, and that seemed woefully. I was hoping I wasn't adding that up right. Okay. In your comments about energy efficiency, you talked about a 94% efficient condensing boiler. Did you evaluate or consider, or are you still considering something like what was done at Casey with the ground sourced heat pump?
That was evaluated early on, and it's really cost prohibitive for what we have the money allocated through the bond for.
Okay. All right. Does BVSD charge for parking for students at any site?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And so then if you don't charge students, you certainly don't charge your faculty and staff, I would assume.
Correct. We
Yeah.
provide parking
Okay.
passes for them, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Laura, go ahead.
I will have some very nice and appreciative comments to make when we get to general discussion. So I just want to start with that and say I think you guys are doing a lot of things that are really wonderful to work with the community, get input, evaluate your options. Really appreciate that. So I think I heard you say that the answer to my previous question about the Chautauqua shuttle is that that service will not get interrupted and that you'll be able to maintain that even during construction and deconstruction.
Correct. We're scheduled to break ground this summer, and we've talked with them that they will maintain that access through next year as well. And so what we don't have planned out right now is really what the access looks like. We shouldn't have any interruptions at all, even into 2025. As long as schedule is maintained, it'll just transfer over to what the new site is. We have, and my understanding is it's really end of May that starts. And so we should have all the site work completed by then of 2025, but right now there's no interruption scheduled.
That is really wonderful. That's such a beautiful contribution to the community. So thank you so much for that. That's really wonderful to hear. I think I heard either in your presentation or in Shannon's presentation, somebody gave a figure that was something like 56 bicycle parking spaces. Did I hear that right? I don't know, Shannon, if that was in your presentation.
I counted, I believe it was 28 bike racks for a total of 56 spaces, since you could get 2 bikes at each rack.
Okay, thank you. I thought I heard that from somebody. So 28 bike racks, an assumption that each bike rack can have a bike on either side. So 56 bicycle parking spaces. Okay, thank you. Those were my questions for now.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Laura. ML, would you like to ask another question? Then I'll have one as well.
Want to go ahead before me, Lisa? You haven't spoken yet.
Sure, I may have a little interrupter here. So Chris, I'd love to hear, I really appreciate that kind of slide that you showed, the conceptualization and so on, and thank you for the information on there being 330 students at New Vista. I was just curious how BVSD took into account facilities planning with enrollment declines, and kind of how that informed the decision to revamp this building, and you know how that fits in more broadly, if it fits in.
Yeah, and we continue to evaluate enrollment decline. We've really found that you know, here there's a strong desire for this program. It is unique programming within the school, and that when we look at our 5-year projections, we don't see a huge increase, but we see what we're projecting as maintaining with a slight increase in 5 years is what we're showing. And so really just maintaining that, again, health and safety in a sustainable building, you know, going forward for that is how this was evaluated. And so as you can see, it was done over 3 years, and there was a lot of support for this as part of the bond measure, as far as when we looked at, and we did look at, do we look at other options for New Vista? Are there other schools and stuff? And so the resounding support was for a new building or upgraded building to maintain this site, because of that community connection was also a big proponent of this.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you. ML, go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. Chris, I have a number of questions that are around the making a modern energy efficient building.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just go through my list, starting with the parking situation. So I understand you have 115 parking spaces and 4 EV.
Yes.
Could that number be increased, the EV?
Yes, it can be, yes. In fact, we've had extensive discussions. We're putting in additional infrastructure to expand on that as that growth happens and the need and the demand increases.
And parallel to that, would there be any on-site options for e-bike charging?
I think that we absolutely have the infrastructure for that, and that would be something that in my opinion, be added easily with what we have dedicated there.
Mhm.
So I don't see that there would be any prohibitive measures that would keep us from having e-bikes.
Right. So
You
the
know,
thoughts are there.
sustainability goals, that's what we're looking towards as well, is how do we increase those possibilities?
Right. So you spoke about your energy efficient strategies being built to the BVSD green building. I'm not familiar with that, but how would they or how do they relate to like some pretty high standards like the Perceive House standard or LEED Platinum?
So
What is-
it's LEED, it's really what our sustainability our green building practices are really trying to achieve practices that align with LEED Gold in our buildings. So how do we get close to that? To get the designation itself and have that is sometimes costly, but everything that we do in design and implementation is to meet those standards.
Going to that standard?
Correct.
And is that the highest standard you would seek?
That's currently what the board has adopted is LEED Gold standards, and that's what's written into our green building practices.
Mhm. Would they consider a higher standard?
I would, I guess I couldn't speak on behalf of the board and in changing that policy really at this point.
Mhm.
I could, I've actually got the document up and.
Well, just referring back to the, sort of title of the bond, modern energy efficient building. It didn't set a standard, but there are some pretty achievable, pretty high standards out there.
Absolutely.
And New Vista and the type of curriculum it gives, I
Mhm.
think it would just be so pertinent for that building to show off. And it could by adopting a more stringent and higher standard that can be reflected in such a way that it becomes a teaching tool.
And we continue to analyze every efficiency that we can through design. We just had our 50% CD review, and there was a lot of comments and feedback based on that review.
Mhm.
And so we are continuing to evaluate and refine design for those standards.
So my last question has to, well, two questions. You talk about you're gonna demolish the existing building.
Yes.
I don't, again, know what the green building of BVSD entails, but is that actually deconstruction?
Yeah, we anything to be recycled, be used, repurposed. I mean, we evaluate that as any kind of building practice that we go into.
Okay.
There's
And
a significant amount of abatement too that has to go into it. So, decontaminating things and kind of evaluating through that is going to be part of the process as well.
and last question, you've seen the Landmarks Board recommendation. Is the project's goal to follow their recommendation? Their recommendation being that there be a teaching component about the existing school, the historical importance and documentation of the existing school.
Absolutely. And we even have a space, we've evaluated a few different spaces within the school. We've landed on one that has a lot of community access potential and after hours access for performances near the auditorium. We're still in the developmental phases of what that looks like. I've done this in the past though, where we do want to memorialize the history throughout and have that be interactive and display as much of that history and connection that this building has had for many years, decades.
Great.
So that
Thank you so much.
Incorporated.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing the intentions that the project is moving forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Amel. Kurt, I think you said you might have some more questions, not to put you on the spot. And anyone else who'd like to raise their hand again, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I want to follow up on Lisa's question about the enrollment. So you talked about a 5-year projection. Do you have enrollment projections further out based on current elementary enrollment or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we do really projections on all our schools and areas of the district and stuff. And there is a long-range planning committee that addresses this, and they meet regularly on what enrollment looks like. And there's pockets, right, where we have, really where we're projecting more growth, which is out east. And then we have other areas that are declining, and some of that we feel could be attributed to some, programming. So we have other aspects of the bond that we're really trying to emphasize as far as career pathways, career and technical education, upgrades, and really New Vista in what it offers is kind of unique in itself. And so it is its own little niche high school, I think, and program that is very popular, and we hope that it continues that. And we do feel that with a better facility and better, I guess, areas to meet program needs, that's going to sustain in that area.
Okay, thank you. The next question, getting back to the question about parking. So how did you determine the 115? I think you said 115 is the number of parking spaces that you're proposing. Is that based on ITE parking generation standards, or how did you come up with that number?
It's really how do we maximize the site, really. And again, if Gardner is here and he wants to jump in on this, he can probably speak to a lot more of the specifics if you guys will allow it. But it's really how do we want to reduce the amount of pavement, but really provide enough access for everybody and for the community to utilize that, because there are people that come again for Chautauqua. There's a lot of events and performances that happen within New Vista, and so how do we maximize that area while also kind of reducing our footprint of asphalt within this?
Okay, well, yeah, if there's any more follow-up that we could have on that, that would be great. But while I've got you, one final question. Has on this site or any other site, has BVSD ever considered, or is it even allowed to provide on-site housing, for example, for teachers or staff?
I don't think that's been considered. I think that's a pretty big site constraint typically, with just programmatic what we have to offer, and with the 12 acres that we have here, we're kind of at that maximum what we have for the school and programmatically what we can provide. So I don't think that's a policy the board has adopted at this point.
But as far as you know, there are no prohibitions like at the state level on doing something like that?
I'm not aware of any. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, before I move to public participation, unless staff or another planning board member corrects me, I think as the chair, I could invite Gardner Clute or someone else if they wanted to speak to some of Kurt's questions or someone else's from the applicant team. Feel free to address us at this time if you'd like. And while we wait on that, also, if any board members have any further questions for the applicant, feel free to raise your hand.
I just wanted to say, I think that Chris has pretty adequately addressed that parking question. I don't have much more to add to that question. If there's more specifics, I can more specific questions, I can try to answer those on the parking, but I think that Chris has pretty adequately responded so far.
Cool. Thank you, Gardner, for entertaining me calling on you. Kurt or Mark or anyone else, is there anything specific you'd like to attempt to put to Gardner, or can we move forward?
Well, sorry, if I can just follow up on that. So I guess I'm still not clear how you came up with this 115 number. Is that based on some sort of standards like from ITE, or is it just sort of what you were able to fit in?
Sure, no, it's not just what we're able to fit in, and it's not based, I don't believe, on the ITE standards. However, we did take a look at the size of the school, the number of students, this being a high school. Only about a quarter of those students are going to be even of an age that they can drive. And so We also looked at the number of staff. And so early in the project, we evaluated the students as well as the number of staff, and worked with BVSD and our project manager to determine what we felt would be the appropriate number of spaces based on that.
Thank you. Mark, I see your hand raised as well.
Yeah, thanks. How many spaces exist, how many parking spaces exist today at the school? You know?
I'm sorry, I wish I had that number in my head, but it is less than half of what we are proposing. It's a significantly smaller parking lot.
And do you happen to know the number of bike parking spaces at the current school?
I'm sorry, I do not know the bike-based spaces, but that is also significantly less than what we were providing at the new school.
Okay, having not been to New Vista in recent years in the morning, does anyone have any anecdotal information in terms of the degree of fullness of the current parking lot, bike racks overflowing, bike racks underutilized? Anyone have any sort of anecdotal sort of, gee, last time I was there, I saw this? No, okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you, members of the planning board. Any further questions before we move on to the public participation portion? Looking for hands. Speak up if I'm not calling on you. It means I can't see you. All right, in that case, we're going to move to public participation for this hearing item only. If you are an attendee and would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand, and then Vivian, I believe, will be running the public participation, and we'll have 3 minutes per speaker.
So I don't see any hands, Lisa.
Yeah, I'm also not seeing any. So I don't want to call people out by name in case you don't want me to, but if you're hoping to speak to this, please look for your little hand symbol and go ahead and click it in the next 10 to 15 seconds.
Yeah, before we move on. No hands. I think we can move on.
All right, we'll move forward. So the next part is planning board deliberation. And I just want to say again that this is sort of being run like a concept review. However, with a proviso that BVSD will not then be coming back for actual formal approval. So this is kind of our chance to share our feedback and thoughts and feelings, maybe even recommendations. But that BVSD is a sovereign entity who kind of, to a large extent, gets to do what they want. So if you have things you would like to share with the folks we have from the applicant, please go ahead and raise your hand. We have nothing to share. I have things to share. Okay, Laura, go ahead.
I'll go first. I just want to thank BVSD again. I know that you are required to come and ask us what we think, but really appreciate you being here, your presentation, answering all of our questions. I think you can tell this board is concerned with things like reducing traffic and parking and single vehicle occupancy trips, planning for the future of electrification for both cars and bikes, energy efficiency and design. You know, I really appreciate it. My background is I'm a facilitator, so I really appreciated seeing what you did with your working group that had parents and teachers and staff and students thinking about what your school needs for the future. Really appreciated you sharing your decision-making matrix. Your logic is compelling of why you chose to rebuild rather than renovate. So I don't really have a lot of feedback for you other than to say thank you for being here, and I think job well done. And I think that, you know, this school is a great asset to the community, and clearly you care about your relationship with the community. And just thanks again for being you and for being here, and good luck with your new project.
Thank you, Laura. Kurt, I see your hand up.
Thank you. First of all, I'll say that I attended Baseline Junior High for 3 years, growing up on the Hill for 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. So I know the building very well, inside and out. And I know the site, and I know the bike the bike route down Cascade, which is what I took every day from 12th Street, extremely well. And I appreciate the design of the building. I think that it would, do, it looks nice, it would do well. I appreciate the energy efficiency aspects that you're incorporating. It would be nice, as Mark mentioned, it would be nice if there were a way to do a ground source heat pump as opposed to gas fired heating, but maybe that's not possible. So I do appreciate a lot about it. I have big concerns though about the site layout. That is my biggest concern. And I think that this is largely driven by your desire to keep the existing school and build the new school adjacent to it while retaining service in the existing school, and then deconstruct the existing school. But to me, the very parking forward site design to me feels extremely suburban. It feels very much auto-centric. It does not feel at all appealing for people walking and biking from the neighborhood, which hopefully a lot of people will do, as I did when I went to Baseline. The on-site connections, especially for pedestrians, to me feel inadequate. But the biggest concern is just having this large building set way back from the streets, from 20th and from Baseline, in behind a really very large sea of asphalt parking. So I have a lot of concerns about that. I think there are a lot of BDCP policies which is what we're supposed to be looking at in this review. There are a lot of BDCP policies that really indicate that that is not the way we want things to be built. Again, I understand that in the short term for you, it's important to be able to keep students on site throughout the construction process. But as the planning board, we also need to think about the full, hopefully 70-year course of this building. And I'm concerned about 70 years of very parking forward design. So I'll go quickly through the Boulder Valley Comp Plan policies that I think are related, which just went away. So 241C says projects should relate positively to public streets, sidewalks, paths, and natural features. Buildings and landscaped areas, not parking lots, should present a well-designed face to the public realm. 241E, projects should provide a complete network of vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian connections, both internal to the project and connecting to adjacent properties, streets, and paths. 241F, the primary focus of any site should be quality site design. Parking should play a subordinate role to site and building design and not jeopardize open space or other opportunities on the property. Parking should be integrated between or within buildings and be compact and dense. The placement of parking should be behind and to the sides of buildings or in structures rather than in large street-facing lots. Yeah, I'll skip some of these, but then 811 specifically talks about schools. The city and county will work with the school district to consider transportation impacts when planning for school sites and facilities. And 812 The city and county will work with the Boulder Valley School District to develop safe and convenient pedestrian, bicycle, and transit access for students to existing and new schools. New school facilities will be located so that school-age children have the opportunity to arrive safely on their own. So I would love to see greater consideration of how do we design a site and a program that really encourages as many people as possible, as many students, hopefully also faculty and staff, although that I realize is more difficult, to walk to school, to bike to school, to take the skip or the other buses to school. And I think that there are the opportunities here, as staff's memo said, you know, there are a lot of opportunities, but the focus in the staff memo was on the opportunities rather than clearly seeing that we have taken up those opportunities. And so I think that there's room for improvement in terms of the site design to really make a straightforward, pedestrian-centric site design. Perhaps with the existing, I mean, the design of the building itself, I think, is great internally, but its layout on the site, I think, is problematic. The one last thing I'll say about that is, it seems like, from what I can tell from the site design, there's a lot of sort of unprogrammed grassy space out in front, which, you know, can be great, but in a hotter, drier world, I'm concerned about having large expanses of turf that are not being used as efficiently as they could be. And I feel like these big open expanses in front, yeah, maybe, you know, kids will sit out there and stuff, but to me, it doesn't feel like a very efficient use of the amount of water that will be required. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for those thorough comments. Mark and then ML.
Well, Kurt said everything I want to say and did it better. And so it might seem like I'm just piling on. So I don't want you to feel like that. But I want to reinforce his comments about the parking forward, parking centric design. And I actually spent, so just addressing that, roughly, I took the PDF and got a little measurement tool out. And there is about, by my calculations, I could be wrong, but I think I'm pretty close. There is about 1,200 square feet dedicated to bike facilities of one or another. And I was pretty generous in my area calculations around the bike parking. There are 32,000 square feet. So approximately 30 times, 25 to 30 times the area dedicated to car parking. And so not only is there a lot of it, as Kurt says, it's not particularly well placed, and it's a very parking forward suburban sort of feel, very much like the high school I went to, and very different from, you know, when you double parking from a current site without increasing the number of students or faculty or staff, you are and you're not charging for that parking. You are creating an induced demand by making it easier, funner, better, less problematic to arrive via a car. You are in fact creating an induced demand. So I caution against that in your design. And, you know, New Vista is an innovative school, and I support New Vista as a concept in practice. And I know kids, and I have close relationships with adults now that graduated from New Vista, and New Vista was a very important part of their lives and success as young adults, and critical to them as teenagers. And I think that the design of a new school for a high school like New Vista warrants a really forward look. You know, a design that is about where you want to be for those students and for our future community members. And the current design is kind of a backward, auto-centric, suburban sort of view. But yet the world is changing, and when I visit schools, I have grandkids, and I visit elementary and middle schools and so forth. The one common thing I see is, because, and this is school choice, and we're not here to debate school choice, but I see these incredibly long queues of parents dropping off their kids, and just what you described. And so your design might ameliorate some of that long queuing, but it does it by making more room for them versus providing better facilities for parents to feel comfortable that their kid can take their bike or their e-bike and get to school without having to drive them. And you know, and if you go to many schools, you have two things happening simultaneously. You have bike racks where it's difficult for kids to park their bike because they're so full. Simultaneously, you have parents struggling to get their car and to drop off their kids that, for whatever reason, they might live too far away, they might not feel safe, are driving their kid to school. And so we've kind of deconstructed typical bus infrastructure, and we're starting to accommodate this commuter drop off of kids, and it really should be the inverse. So I hope, you know, and we are like, you know, seeking, you know, we're just advisory. We have no decision-making role or whatever. But if you were coming to us with a commercial development and you were subject to us, I think to our thoughts or in a site review, don't think that we wouldn't be harsh on you. We would be, and these are the kind of comments we give to people as they come to us for concept review and then come back to us for real site review. So anyway, I just hope that you continue to work on your design for a better look for the students and the future of BVSD and Boulder. That's it.
Thank you, Mark. ML and then Georgie.
Thank you, Lisa. So parking. I think I'll say one more and different thing about the parking. My understanding from listening to the input into how you arrived where you arrived, understanding that it's significantly more than what's there now, et cetera, I would just encourage there to be a process whereby you end up with right-sized parking based on the actual need. And so I'm not a transportation specialist, but I would think that there would be some means and methods, given obviously Boulder Valley School District has access to data from all of their sites. Let's get the parking right-sized. And secondarily, in case it isn't right-sized, in case it is too big, and in case the future comes as we expect it to come, plan for obsolescence. What happens to that parking lot if suddenly, not suddenly, but slowly, you know, the boiling pot of water on the thing, on the stove, the need for parking diminishes? What happens to that area that has had the big investment if you are in fact going to use asphalt rather than pervious paving? How can that become repurposed? I think that if you look nationally and globally, the plan for parking to become obsolete is out there. So I would encourage the school, the New Vista, Boulder Valley School District and its policies to think about parking, right size it, and plan for obsolescence. I think that that will be here sooner than we imagine, and we've got this big capital investment in the parking lot. And the second thing I'll say, and I've already said it, but I'm going to say it just one more time, is aim for the highest standard insofar as energy efficiency. LEED Gold is LEED Gold. It's not platinum. It's not Passive House. There are much more robust standards. And it would be, again, I think, a boon to the population that New Vista is serving to really come forth with some great leading edge strategies for how this building, and add the word resilient to your energy efficient strategies. I mean, this is the future. We're educating the future, and resilient buildings, not just energy efficient buildings, not just buildings that use less, but how are they going to perform in a future climate that is shifting? So both of the things I'm putting on, obsolescence in parking and highest standard, and include resilient in the way the building actually gets constructed and functions, I think would be brilliant considerations for this project. I am in full support. I love the strategy of, you know, how you build a new building and don't disrupt the student population. I was there when we had a church burned down, and we were there for St. Baseline. It acted as a church, so we'd go into the auditorium for services there. So, you know, schools have a big role to play in the community, and I really appreciate that you're doing that you're bringing forth this design in this new school with the idea that it will be continuously in use throughout the process. I think that that is a really important feature of what you're proposing. I just am encouraging you to take it a step further and think we're in the 21st century and there are some different things that should be on the table. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time with us today. And I know you don't have to take any of our input. You're not legally required, but I hope that this provides food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ML. Georgie, and then I'll call on myself.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few comments. I'll try to keep it short because why not? As it relates to what ML said about building efficiency, I think to me that hits home more than anything else. I'm very supportive of your entire plan. Given that the structure is 70-year-old today that you're replacing, and a lot of our schools are of similar age and are aging and are long-term facilities, that would be my area of encouragement, would just be to focus on as much as what you can do for the planning of a facility that might have another 70-year life, and how meaningful that would be to the BVSD community if we were really to use that as an example of how far you could take it. As it relates to parking, I'm going to have a slightly different take than my colleagues. I think that as a parent with 2 kids in BVSD myself, I understand how complex and how busy our lives are as parents, and how challenging it can be. I think that the process that you went through with parents and architects working through this and trying to design the best facility that worked for everybody resonates with me. So I don't profess to be any more expert than all the people that you had involved in this process, including the teachers and students and parents. And so if that was indeed the outcome, then I'm supportive of that. The other reason I'm supportive of that parking is we talked about, I think Laura brought up the Chautauqua shuttle and the idea that you've got the space and you're using it for other community benefit, specifically in the case of the Chautauqua shuttle as an area where the community can benefit from that and take some pressure off of the Chautauqua area. And so I don't have any further comments beyond that, but I appreciate you coming to us and at least listening to our input. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgie. All right, so I'll try to be brief. My comments echo a lot of what we've heard. So I agree, investments in a long lasting building that can serve New Vista or any other use in the future, I think is great. And then anything to do with energy efficiency, smart energy use, energy generation, and so on site. I think, you're probably thinking about this, but I would look at those investments as things that could and should actually save you a lot of money over time. I don't think energy is going to be getting any cheaper anytime soon, unless we get a really weird breakthrough, which we've been trying to do for a long time. So so just kind of scoping that and making sure you're looking at savings over time for the district and for facilities and operations, as well as that upfront cost. I also don't love the parking right on the street front. It may be unavoidable because of the way you need to use the building. But I also know that long range planning is looking at closing other schools in other locations. They're not talking about that yet, but that's where we're going. And based on the size of your student body, I wonder about relocating there. And I know you're far along in site planning, so that may be a bit of a pipe dream, but ideally I would love to see a beautiful building that was more on that pedestrian walkway and kind of provided a nice street front and parking pushed back. And then what else was I going to say? I appreciated your attention to enrollment, and I think New Vista does provide a pretty unique service, but I think kind of just tracking that over time is really important, which I know you're thinking about. This one I'm not sure you'll need because ranges keep getting longer, but looking at partners and options for doing integrated EV charging on site. We're going to see more and more EV vehicles, and people may want to charge at work or may only have the option to charge at work if they live in multifamily and don't have another option. So especially because there is so much parking proposed, which is quite a bit of parking, I would love to see that some of that, is accommodating EV. And then finally, I appreciate the desire, as I heard it, to continue to partner with Chautauqua on Park to Park. I think that's a really nice relationship, and it just works really well kind of in the more off season for New Vista that the parking is still used, and I think there is a pretty high usage during the summer, and it's quite convenient, and people kind of hit it maybe even after going up and realizing they can't park. It's the first spot you hit, so I think that can be a nice usage. And again, thank you for coming in front of us. We know we don't have a binding authority here, and we hope we've given you some useful stuff and look forward to seeing how it moves forward. Any other planning board members who have anything further to add? All right, I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back at 7:53, and we'll move on to our next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You're at 7:53, and I think people are rejoining us. Kurt, do you have a question to the matter at hand or another question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just wanted to follow up on the last item. So I think staff will be writing a letter to to BVSD. Is that how that is coming down? And then if that's correct, I was just wondering, would we get a chance to see that letter before it went out permanently?
Yeah, so that was an option that staff presented in the presentation. If the planning board wishes to make a motion to direct staff to write a letter with specific requests, we can certainly do that. I think that motion would need to come from planning board if you wish to do so.
Thank you for bringing that up, Kurt. Good catch and good point. Shannon, were there other options proposed, or was that kind of the mechanism?
So the options were to simply provide the feedback as you've done tonight, kind of the typical concept plan review and comment kind of verbal feedback. And that's all that's required. If you choose to have staff write a letter, we would need to know kind of what are the things we should put in the letter of specific requests. So in that case, you could make a motion directing us to write that.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. I think we're still waiting on ML. So if anyone should wish to make such a motion, I'll ask that we maybe wait one or two more minutes. Laura, did you have something to add?
Well, I wanted to make a comment about that, but I think maybe we should wait for ML to get back, and so she's included in the discussion. I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you, Kurt, for bringing it up.
Yeah, and not to call her out because I'm not infrequently a little late if I'm not running a meeting, but I'll probably give her like another minute or two, and then if not, we'll start discussion. Hopefully she can join us.
Kurt, were you born in Boulder?
I was not born in Boulder. I was born in Illinois, but my family moved here when I was 4. So I actually attended kindergarten for 3 days in Alton, Illinois. And then all the rest of my schooling until I went off to grad school was in Boulder.
Kindergarten through grad school. Wow. Okay.
Kindergarten through college, through undergrad.
Okay. Wow. Still pretty good.
If we're keeping score, yes, I was born in Boulder. All right, have we got ML back? Yes, welcome ML. ML, we had a question kind of still right toward the end of break or possibly out of break. Kurt pointed out in the memo that we have the option to both provide review, thank you for bringing that slide up, provide view and comment feedback directly to the applicant as we did on the prior item. And that there was, and I think maybe this was a little unclear, and or as I'm interpreting it, and I think that's what you're asking about, Kurt, to make a motion to like actually draft a letter or do something similar. And so Kurt spoke to that second option of B, and then I think Laura had some thoughts to add. So Laura, go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. So I personally don't feel particularly compelled to write a letter to BVSD. I think that our verbal comments were thorough. I think they were listening. I'm sure they will be reflected in the notes that will come out of this meeting. I'm not sure that us writing a letter would provide any additional heft or weight or incentive for them to follow our recommendations. which I think were clear. I don't think there's a lack of clarity. I also think we didn't necessarily have consensus on all of the different items that we talked about, the way that we would need to if we were putting conditions on a site review. And so I'm just imagining the process of trying to direct staff and tell them what to put in that letter could get long and complicated, and I'm not sure that it would actually have much of an impact on the project. So I probably would not be inclined to do that, although if my fellow board members want to do that, of course I will participate.
Thank you, Laura. A further comment to the letter idea? Kurt, did you feel strong enough that you wanted to make a motion to see if such a motion would be upheld, or anything further?
Yeah, I will move that we request or direct, I guess, staff to draft a letter to the BBSD Board of Directors to be signed by the city manager, incorporating the staff memorandum and requesting proposed, is that what that is? Proposed changes.
Thank you, Kurt. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Mark. My inclination, unless, well, now we can talk if we want to, right? Are we also free to just move to vote? Or do we have to talk?
I think it's good to have.
Yeah.
the
All right,
motion maker
you've
speak
got
to the motion.
5 minutes for everybody. Go ahead, Mark.
Lisa, according to our last, is this not according to the rules of the motion making? You read the thing again and then it becomes owned by the, and then we have our conversation. I don't know if we follow
I
that
don't know.
protocol
That's
or
a good
not,
question.
but-
I heard Kurt read it into the record, but I'm happy to restate it. So yeah, I'll read it more formally into the record again. So we had a motion from Kurt Nordback, a motion to direct staff to draft a letter to the Boulder Valley School District Board of Directors to be signed by the city manager, incorporating the staff memorandum and requesting proposed changes. We have not yet stated exactly what we'd like it to include, but the next part is including. This motion was then seconded by Mark McIntyre, and I'm giving us a limited amount of time, just due to the hour, to speak to this, and then also to think about how we might draft it if it were to be carried. Mark, you have the floor first, then Laura, I'll call on you second.
I'm sorry, just a point of order though, Lisa. I feel like the motion is incomplete because it says requesting proposed changes and we don't yet know what those changes are. So I'm not sure how we can speak to the motion without knowing what those changes are.
That's a great question. So I think where I'm at, and I guess we could maybe do thumbs on this, I'm curious whether of the planning board members present, and let me see, are we in even number? I think we are. I think we are 6, so we could be a hung jury. But I'd be curious. I'm curious to see, without silencing any discussion to this motion, before we get into thinking about what the proposed changes are, I'd like to know whether we have a majority who even want to do a letter. Planning board and or staff, if anyone has a recommendation on kind of how to handle that, I kind of like to do thumbs. So I'm going to ask, and I'll kind of scroll back and forth. So put your thumb up and keep it up or down if you would like to do a letter. I'm just curious if we have a lot of people who want to do it. All right, I see, and sorry, I'm about to scroll. I see Georgie, Amal, Laura, and myself down. That is 4 against 2. Procedurally, I want to recognize that I don't want to do the motion process incorrectly. However, it seems like we don't have enough people who are even interested in sending a letter. So I don't fully I personally, and maybe my bias, don't see a point in spending a whole lot of time talking about what goes in a letter we don't want to do. Brad?
I did want to just make sure you do need to close out the vote, the motion with the vote, unless the original motion maker withdraws it.
Okay. I also take Laura's point that it's sort of like an including ... at the moment. I suppose we could still vote on it.
So then, okay, I think we have gotten a little twisted in our mechanics of motion making, and then we're fresh off of some new instruction. But the way it would, I think it would go would be, the motion is made, it's seconded, the chair restates the motion. The motion maker would speak to the motion, and then anyone would make any proposed amendments. And I have one to be made. And so the thumbs vote procedurally, I think, is slightly out of order. And I'm not trying to delay this. I can read the writing here. However, I think that a possible amendment might change a vote. So anyway, I would propose that Kurt speak to his motion. And then if anyone has an amendment, they make it. And then we can call the vote at any time.
Okay, so, and again, I want to be careful, and Laurel, I saw your hand up, so you may have some further feedback, or other staff may as well. I'm wondering if perhaps, and again, I want to do it procedurally correctly, but if we need the motion reintroduced with some content after the including. In order
That was
to
what
move
I was
forward.
going to make an amendment. I was going to make an
Do,
amendment.
okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so Kurt, are you, does that work for you to next hear from Mark on what he would propose as an amendment to add in that ... area?
Yes, but if I can just speak briefly on it, I just feel like there may, I certainly was guilty of using a bunch of jargon in what I was talking about in this discussion, which I think staff is completely comfortable with, but I'm not sure how comfortable the representatives from BDSD were. And so my notion is that there are, but thinking of this similar to a concept review. In a concept review, the sense of the board gets written up, and in some places there's consensus, and in some places, there's not consensus, and that all gets captured. And I just thought having the opportunity for staff with potentially input from the board to write this up and maybe make it a little, a little clearer than when I was talking or when other people perhaps were talking, and a little more, written out in text, I think would just help to clarify it for BVSD, and they can do with it as they see fit, but it just seems like an effective way to help convey a lot of the concepts that we were putting out there. So that was my thought.
Thank you for that, Kurt. Mark, if you'd like to add that amendment to the motion that's currently on the floor, please do so.
I want to speak to the motion first, and I will say that I concur with Kurt, and here it is. BVSD, while not being required, as a courtesy to us, came and sought our input. And as a courtesy to them, I thought all of our comments were well considered. We spent time reading the packet, and our comments, I think, are well considered and worthy of distribution to a broader audience. BVSD is a big organization, much bigger than the two folks that presented to us tonight and answered our questions. And I think that it is a perfectly staff is perfectly well tasked to writing a summarizing letter, incorporating our thoughts as they do at concept review. So my amendment would be rather than saying incorporating the staff memorandum and requesting proposed changes, I would move to strike requesting proposed changes, including, and after the word and summarizing and noting the board's input on the future school design. my understanding is now that I've made a motion to amend, I need a second for that to go any further.
Do we
That's
have
what I
a
was gonna
second?
say. You need a second.
And I will second.
All right, second from Kurt. I'm going to read it back in and Mark, if you could listen carefully and make sure that I jotted down your words correctly. We have, sorry, Laurel, your hand is still up. Did you have a further comment?
Nope.
Okay. A motion originally made by Kurt, amended and seconded by Mark, and then amended by Mark and seconded by Kurt. We have a motion to direct staff to draft a letter to the Boulder Valley School District Board of Directors to be signed by the city manager, incorporating the staff memorandum and summarizing and noting the board's input on the future, my school design. Okay.
I think
All
that
right.
captured it. Thank you.
And so on this motion, I will now do a roll call vote. Laura?
Lisa, can we
Yes.
speak? Can we speak to it?
Sure.
Have discussion?
Sure.
I will just say briefly, Mark, I like your amendment, and it sounds like what this would do is basically take the staff memo and the summary of what we talked about tonight, which would be in the meeting notes, and we'll have the opportunity to edit or amend our comments and make sure that they're accurately captured. And those two things would be compiled and sent. And the main purpose of doing that is so that it gets to a wider audience and make sure that the Boulder Valley School District Board of Directors sees it. Is that what I'm hearing? I see a thumbs up from Mark. I think for me, that is much less fraught. I think it adds a little bit of extra work for staff, but it's basically taking products that they're going to produce anyway and packaging it up and sending it to the BVSD Board of Directors, which, can't hurt. So I would actually not be opposed to that. And that's all I will say.
Thank you, Laura. Further discussion. ML, go ahead, and then Kurt.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for that clarification or that amendment. It keeps it simple rather than trying to identify every single thing that anybody said and broad enough. It's like the notes of the meeting and they're just packaged up. I think that is a not just simple way of doing it, but it's also a very respectful way of doing it, respectable of everybody's time and energy. We've said what we have to say, and if that can be captured in a letter and it will go to the board for the process that is outlined, I would also support that with your amendment.
Thank you, ML. And Kurt.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank Mark for clarifying my not well conceived motion. That was sort of the intent of what I had originally, but didn't stay right. So thank you.
Further discussion to this motion. Clicking back and forth, just to make sure I don't miss anybody. Oh, yes, please, Laura, go ahead.
Just procedurally, I think that even though we have 6 members present tonight, we need 4 to pass any planning board member measure. Is that right? I see Laurel nodding.
Yeah, that's correct. I was going to say that if it was
Still
3.
need 4. Correct. Thank you for that clarification, Laura. All right. I will go ahead and call a roll call vote then on the motion in front of Georgie.
Yes, yeah. Fine with that.
Laura,
Sure, why not? Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
ML.
Yes.
And I maybe should have said this under discussion. I'm fine with it as long as we don't get into editing this thing. I think, yeah, I'm fine with it, but I don't want to be editing it. So yes. All right. We have wrapped up that item then, I believe, unless anyone has any other further procedural notes. And thank you again, Kurt, for catching that and bringing it forward. Okay, we're moving on to our next public hearing item. This is for 5405 Spine Road. And you've all had the chance to read that, and staff will speak to it at length. Before we get into this item, has everyone had the chance to look at this, and does anyone have any disclosures? Live within 600 feet, secretly own the whole site. Okay, great. All right, so I'd like to go ahead and invite staff to speak.
All right, thank you. Can everyone see my screen? Sans notes? Okay. So good evening, planning board members. We will be discussing the 5405 Spine Road proposed rezoning. So this is public hearing and consideration of a request to rezone a 1.01 acre parcel located at 5405 Spine Road and adjacent rights of way, currently zoned industrial general to business community 2 for consistency with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and the Gun Barrel Community Center Plan. This application is reviewed under application LUR 2022-00057. So for location, the site is located at the northwest corner of Spine and Lookout Roads and is occupied by an existing 14,643 square foot building constructed in 1982 that has housed a variety of industrial and office uses over the past 40 years. The building currently contains an office use. There's a surface parking lot with 39 existing spaces, no bike parking, and several existing mature trees. The site is located within the boundaries of the Gun Barrel Community Center Plan, also known as the GCCP. The GCCP is a future land use and transportation plan for the entire Gun Barrel commercial area, initiated in a public process by the city in 2002. Through public participation, the plan established the vision for redevelopment in much of the Gun Barrel commercial and office area with the goal of emphasizing urban development patterns with a diverse mix of vibrant uses. The plan provides direction for reviewing future public improvements and private sector development proposals in the area and redevelopment direction for individual landowners. The GCCP identifies the site for community retail. The community retail definition in the Gun Barrel Community Center Plan notes the uses in this area will be easily accessible by automobile and cater to the convenient shopping of household goods. In addition, the plan recommends a community business comprehensive plan land use designation for the site. As you can see here, the BVCP was updated following adoption of the GCCP, GCCP, and the current land use designation for the site is community business. Community business is defined as areas that are the focal point for commercial activities serving a sub-community or a collection of neighborhoods. They are designated to serve the daily convenience, shopping, and personal service needs of nearby residents and workers and support the goal of walkable communities. The existing zoning on the site is industrial general, or IG, which is defined as general industrial areas where a wide range of light industrial uses, including research and manufacturing operations and service industrial uses, are located. Residential uses and other complementary uses may be allowed in appropriate locations. By definition, as you can see, most of the uses allowed in this zone district are industrial. So for the surrounding context, on the site there is highlighted in yellow, and this is just a Google Earth screenshot just because it's very convenient for showing all the different businesses that exist there. The immediate surroundings are primarily industrial, but retail uses are nearby along with some new residential uses. Since adoption of the GCCP, several properties have been rezoned consistent with the adopted land use designations that had been implemented based on the GCCP. So here, just highlighted in yellow are all properties that have been rezoned in the last 10 years following adoption of the GCCP. So 6333 Lookout Road was rezoned from IG to BC2 and developed with a Hampton Inn Hotel with approval for 3 office or retail buildings aligning Lookout Road. The hotel was approved in 2008 and is complete and operational. 6685 Gun Park Road, which is now the Gun Barrel Town Center. That was rezoned to BR1. And that development was approved in 2012 and now contains King Supers and a variety of other neighborhood serving retail and restaurant uses. 5460 Spine Road, which was originally approved as the Alexan, but is now, I believe, known as the Apex. That's an 8.6 parcel located 1 block north of the site. That was rezoned to RH5. And that was rezoned not only to provide supporting residential uses in proximity to the Gun Barrel Town Center, but also to enable residential development in close proximity to what was originally the proposed RTD rail stop in the light industrial area directly to the west. Since that time, the planned RTD stop has been relocated to the west of 63rd Street, but the new RTD stop remains within a quarter mile. And additional bus stops are located at the intersection of Lookout and Spine Roads. 6655 Lookout Road, which is a 100% permanently affordable apartment project, was approved in 2013. And 5400 Spine Road, which is the pink BC2 site immediately to the east of the project site, was rezoned from IG to BC2 in 2014 and has since been redeveloped as a mix of office and retail uses. So the key issue for discussion tonight is whether the rezoning request is consistent with the required review criteria for rezoning. So the criteria for rezoning are found in section 9219E of the Boulder Revised Code. They say that the city council shall grant a rezoning application only if the proposed rezoning is consistent with the policies and goals of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, and for an application not incidental to a general revision of the zoning map meets one of the following criteria. So first I will discuss the underlined portion, which is consistency with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. So in terms of consistency with the BVCP, staff finds that the proposed rezoning is on balance consistent with the BVCP goals and policies, particularly policy 2.19, neighborhood centers, which supports evolution of these centers to become mixed-use places in accordance with area planning efforts. Policy 2.09, neighborhoods as building blocks. Policy 2.24, commitment to a walkable and accessible city. And policy 5.01, revitalizing commercial and industrial areas. Additional information about the consistency with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan is found in the staff memo. So finding that it is consistent with the BVCP, the proposal still needs to meet one of the review criteria listed here. In this case, they are consistent with criterion 1, which is that the proposed rezoning is necessary to come to compliance with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan land use map. So just to reiterate what was stated before, the current Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan land use designation for the site is community business, and that was adopted following adoption of the Gun Barrel Community Center Plan. The proposed zoning of Business Community 2 or BC2 is defined as business areas containing retail centers serving a number of neighborhoods where retail type stores predominate. This zone district is considered to be consistent with the land use designation of community business, where the industrial general zone district is not. So in terms of the review process, rezoning applications are quasi-judicial. Planning board makes a recommendation to city council, and then ultimately city council will have to approve the ordinance that rezones the area. Written notice was sent to property owners within 600 feet. Notice was also posted on the property, and staff has not received any comments or questions on the proposed rezoning. So the conclusion and recommendation is that staff finds that the proposed rezoning application meets the rezoning criteria of section 9219E and finds the proposed rezoning request to be in compliance with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan and the Gun Barrel Community Center Plan. Therefore, staff recommends that planning board recommend approval of the rezoning proposed under case number LUR 2022-00057 to city council, incorporating the staff memorandum in the above review criteria checklist as findings of fact. Suggested motion language would be to recommend to city council approval of the application to rezone 1.01 acres of land located at 5405 Spine Road from industrial general zone district to the business community 2 zone district. And now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Chandler. Let's go ahead and ask any questions. And Laura, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chandler, for a very informative and persuasive presentation. As always, your logic is clear and compelling. So thank you for that. You make our job easy. I do have one question just for my own curiosity. I guess two related questions. It said in the memo that the applicant actually proposes to build a private school on this site, which is consistent with the BC2 zoning. No, I have no problem with that, but I'm just curious, there's a brewery like immediately across the street facing this property. Is that allowed? I thought there were restrictions on having schools next to businesses that serve alcohol, or having businesses that serve alcohol next to schools.
That's a good question. I think that since the brewery was there first, they would be allowed to stay. I don't think you can't build a school near a brewery, but you can't build a brewery near a school.
Interesting. Is this meant to be a school for children or for adults?
You know, the application did not specify. So I believe it's a school for children. I believe it's a private elementary school, but they did not include any project plans. And as far as I know, based on the application materials, they are planning on reusing the existing building and not making any changes to the site, or changes that they could just make through building permit by right.
Okay, it's probably less problematic than a high school across from a brewery. I don't think the 5-year-olds are going to be headed across the street, but anyway, okay, thank you. I was just curious. Thank you so much.
More or less. Awesome. No, don't do that, children. Mark, go ahead.
In the BC2 zone, is a school a use by right?
Yes.
So for them to build, remodel, etc., they would not be required to undergo use review.
No, or site review, unless they are eligible for voluntary site review if they wanted any modifications to the zoning code.
Right. Well, let's just hope that since we think they're building some sort of school, that they put a bike rack in. That's all.
Thank you, Mark. ML, go ahead.
Thank you, Lisa. So Chandler, I have two questions. So is the site currently vacant?
No, I believe it's an office use for a garden supply company.
So this business is going to be displaced by this action?
I believe so. I believe the property would be sold and a new use would take place.
Was there any conversation about accommodating the displaced business?
No. I mean, in general, with rezonings where there's not an associated site review or any sort of project plans that are proposed as part of it, we're just looking at the rezoning criteria. And in terms of the rezoning criteria, it's a pretty clear-cut case of BC2 is consistent with the underlying land use designation and IG is not.
Okay. That's it. That's my question. Thank you so much, Chandler.
Thank you, Amal. Other questions for staff? Please raise hands if you have further questions for staff. I think we'll probably have some for the applicant too. All right, next up, I believe, is the applicant's presentation. We have someone from the applicant who's planning to present tonight.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Stephen
Yeah.
Eckert, thank you.
Yeah, hi, this is Stephen Eckert, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I'm an architect with Caddis Collaborative. Couple of things I wanted to say just in full disclosure. So Watershed School is the applicant, and they are a middle school through high school. a couple of things that came up in the discussion. One really interesting thing with the liquor laws. So the state statute actually describes public and parochial schools as having to follow the 500-foot rule, not private schools. It's actually excluded in the state law, and it's kind of interesting. You guys can look that up and dig into it. But Chandler's right. They were already there, so we can't stop the brewery, and it's of no concern to the school itself. So Watershed's excited to make this zoning change. It's consistent with the Boulder Valley Comp Plan, and it seems pretty straightforward. And the existing building is vacant, and the existing tenant has moved out. That was Arrow Grow, so they are no longer in the property or interested, so no one would be displaced at this time. That's really the short of it. They intend not to add on or change the building, but they would occupy the existing building and of course renovate it for their needs. And we're excited to provide a walkable community service, and potentially residents in the neighborhood would attend the school, their kids, and I think that's all we really have to say. It seems pretty clear cut that it's, you guys even have it on your map as this zone existing, and so we're just following through with the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. Thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me any.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Members of the planning board, questions? Kurt, please go ahead.
Just a question for my curiosity. Did you consider rezoning as BC1 rather than BC2? I'm just curious why you chose BC2.
Yeah, we chose BC2 just because that's what literally is on the revised map that the comprehensive plan is hoping for, and the 5400 is BC2, and then the other property that Chandler talked about that's on the other end of the block is also BC2. So to be consistent with the Boulder Valley Comp Plan that does indeed show that whole section as BC2, that's what we felt was appropriate.
Okay, I thought that the comp plan just showed the area as CB land use.
That's correct.
Well, that's the local plan, but if in our application, I actually downloaded it from the city's website, and it had that whole area shown as that zone. But no, we didn't look at BC1. We just looked at BC2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Other questions for the applicant? I'm not seeing any. Scrolling back and forth just to make sure I'm not missing any hands. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment to this item only. And Vivian, do we still have you? Yes, hi Vivian. If you could run public comment, please. And Vivian, I can't hear you, but maybe it's a me issue.
How about now? I think that works.
Yep, now I can hear
For
you.
whatever reason. Great. So we just have one member from the public. Lynn, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak. No hand raised. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Lynn, last call. If you'd like to speak, this is your opportunity. All right, public comment is closed. Let's move to planning board deliberation and comments. Would anyone like to speak to this item? Laura, yes, please go ahead.
You know, I think it was either Chandler or the applicant or both who said this is basically a slam dunk based on the, you know, BVCP recommendations. So I would be happy to make a motion if there's no other comment from planning board, not to try to close out other comment.
I see ML's hand. ML, were you going to say something similar? Or would you like to comment to the item?
No, I'm in agreement. I would second a motion that Laura would make. I agree that it follows everything to a T.
All right, great. Laura, if you would like to make such a motion, feel free to do so. I think you have a second who is ready and waiting.
Thank you. Chandler, could you put the recommended motion language back up? I'm happy to read it. And
Sure.
then Lisa can, and ML can second, and Lisa can restate. I move to recommend to City Council, I move to recommend to City Council approval of the application to rezone 1.01 acres of land located at 5405 Spine Road from the Industrial General Zone District to Business Community 2.
And ML, do we
I
have a
second.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Chandler, would you mind putting it up one more time?
Yep.
I don't have it memorized. Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot that you had to say it again.
All right, so we have a motion from board member Laura Kaplan, seconded by ML Robles, to recommend to City Council approval of the application to rezone 1.01 acres of land located at 5405 Spine Road from the Industrial General or IG Zone District to Business Community 2 or BC2. I'll now take a roll call vote on this. Oh, no, wait, do we have any discussion? This is what I didn't give us time for last time. Anybody? Okay. Seeing no hands or further discussion from planning board members, I will now call roll call vote. Laura?
Yes.
ML?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Georgie?
Yes.
And myself, Lisa Smith, also votes yes. Motion passes. All right, I think that concludes our public hearing items for this evening, which means that we are on to matters from the board, planning director, and or city attorney. Anything, we'll do a debrief and calendar check after, but any matters from planning board to start. And oh yes, Laura, please go ahead.
So I did want to follow up on that question about whether planning board notes are limited to only our comments on the key items that staff bring forward, or whether general comments are generally going to be included in those notes. Like I think tonight we only did general comments for the BVSD project. So if I don't know if there's anything further on that. I know Brad, you said that staff are looking into it. And that we'll hear more in the future, but I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add tonight. And then I have one other item after that.
Yeah, thank you. I really don't have anything more to add, and certainly don't have a definitive answer. So we will get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. It's just good to know what to expect. I certainly don't want to be giving Devin feedback of, hey, you left this out if there's a really good reason why those shouldn't be in the notes in the first place. So it's good for us all to get on the same page. So thank you. I look forward to hearing more when staff have had a chance to think more about that. I do think that if the only thing that legal staff thinks should be recorded in planning board meeting notes is our response to the key questions, that makes the key questions a lot more important to get those framed in a way that let us say what we want to say to the applicant. So you know, if we can't do general comments or add anything, that becomes a little bit more fraught, which might be my favorite word tonight. So again, looking forward to getting staff input on that. I did have one other thing I wanted to raise, and Lisa, I apologize for not giving you a heads up about this. Nothing big. It's an information request. If staff are able to give us some more information, I find that I have a hole in my knowledge around Boulder's height limitation. I understand what it is, that it is 55 feet, and that is you know, subject to site review, that we only go up to 55 feet under certain circumstances in these certain processes. but I would really love to have more information about what was the ballot measure that was passed by citizens and when was it passed and what was sort of the contemporaneous discussion around that? Because I feel like I don't really understand the intent or the motivation. Some folks have said, you know, people wanted to cap it at 55 feet and then city council at the time ratcheted it down to 35 feet in most zones with the understanding that it could go back up to 55 feet if the site review criteria were met, which I have always interpreted in general as we are inclined to grant site review height modification requests as long as it meets the criteria, it's generally compatible with the neighborhood, and we get the community benefit out of it that we are seeking. I think other folks have expressed to me that their thought was 55 feet should be a very special exemption. It should not be sort of a default that as long as we get our community benefit, we're generally inclined to do it. And I don't really understand like what was put to the voters and what was the discussion at that time. I think I would really like to understand that community conversation a little bit better if staff are able to kind of go back in the archives and share with us what was that ballot measure, maybe what were the editorials that were written about it, like what was that discussion?
Yeah, we'll be happy to follow up on that. Say that there might be an opportunity to do that in the form of more of a memo than a discussion, but we'll kind of parse that out and see what makes the most sense.
That would be totally fine. And I appreciate any information you can provide.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you, Laura, for those questions. Before I move on to Georgie, does that wrap up your questions, Laura? Okay, great. Georgie, go ahead.
My question was really, or matter was really more of some planning for the group. I thought John Gerstel's send off was a great opportunity for us all to get together. I'd like us to consider putting something like that together again in maybe the early fall. And I just kind of wanted to put it out there that we can get Devin's support in calendaring something for our group if everyone wants to do something like that again. But I found that very nice to facilitate our relationships across the board and staff. So just wanted to put that out there.
And let me use that opportunity, and Brad, I'll apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, or Devin or anyone else, but I know when we got to the chance to talk with Sarah as chair and vice chair that you had mentioned that there's continuing effort at the city of trying to figure out how to bring back board meetings, including planning board in person, at least some of the time, or maybe a hybrid model. And I'd wonder if there happen to be any updates on that, or when I know there's some staffing issues and technology issues, but just curious if we have an update on how that's going.
Yeah, there are three things. One was training in technology, and that actually has happened recently. I think, Devin, you were part of that. But the other two legs of the stool that we still need to solve are staffing. Doing hybrid requires essentially an additional staff person for us to manage that successfully. And security. We do not have a security protocol in place in the same way that council does, and those are things that we're trying to be responsive to staff feedback and city policy on that. So it is going to be a little while yet. We are as eager as anybody to get back to live meetings with hybrid options, which is now the city's commitment, but we don't have a timeline for that yet at this point, unfortunately.
Great, thank you, Brad. And then hopefully that wasn't too off topic, Georgie, but especially as somebody who at the last minute could not make the last meeting, I'd love for there to be more informal social gatherings, provided city budget and so on will allow, or even if we're allowed to get together, as long as we don't talk about planning board matters, it'd be great to see folks from time to time. I would love that. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Brad, when you said security, were you referring to physical security for board members and staff? Should we have in-person meetings, or were you talking about like Zoom technological security? What security were you referring to?
In person primarily in that context.
And so boards like HAB, because smaller number, not quasi judicial, less controversial, don't have it's been determined that they don't have a security requirement. Is that?
Yeah, I can't speak to the needs of other departments or other staff. This is a citywide conversation we haven't had yet, so it's still an emerging question. The city manager's office has identified as one of a priority among all of the departments and leadership, senior leadership, a variety of employee wellness topics, and these range from, safety, workplace safety, but also things like parking employee parking, things like that. So it's a wide range of things, and this is something that I need to take up in the context of that conversation, but we just haven't gotten to that point.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other comment to what Georgie mentioned or other questions for staff?
I'll agree that with George's statement that it would be nice to pencil us in for an outing. Devin, if you can do something, that would be really awesome. I think that it is a good opportunity to get to know each other and have conversations.
Kurt, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree and thank you, George, for recommending that. I think that it's so important to talk to each other in person. So thank you.
Great. Well, hopefully we can find sometimes. I think early fall is probably smart because trying to schedule things over the summer is always a mess. So but I think fall should be good. Great. All right. So debrief. So first I want to say, oh, sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Sorry, just wanted to put in a plug. If anybody's interested, this weekend on Sunday from 10 to 12 is a walk with council. And I think it's council members Spear and Weiner and Folkerts. And the topic is wildfire prevention. And they're going to walk around from the Shanahan Ridge Trail where the NCAR fire was and talk about like how that was ecologically functioning and community concerns and things like that. It sounds really interesting, and I might go if I can make time for that. But I thought that's also another opportunity for us to, the folks who want to go to informally chat and learn something maybe. So if folks are interested in that.
That is great, Laura. Thank you for letting me know. I live right down here and can see 2 Barton cars from my house. So Marshall and that one. Oh, 3, actually, there's an older one. But anyway, that sounds like a great talk. And I'll just also offer for any planning board members or staff, as things continue to normalize and staffing normalizes, that's a great one. But there used to be lots of like walk and talks, like seeing sites as they're being developed that had come through planning board. I think the city arborist used to do cool walks and talk about our trees that are like listed for Colorado and so on. And so I'm hesitant to add to staff load. I'm not sure if this necessarily falls under Devin's heading, but if there is, for example, a web page or something where those sorts of opportunities are gathered and where people can kind of go to, it'd be nice to maybe periodically have that link shared with us so we know ways to engage with our electeds and with staff outside of these formal meetings. So thank you for bringing that one forward, Laura. That's really cool. Okay, any other hands? I almost cut Laura off. Okay. So I'll use a little time to talk to debrief. So thank you everyone so much for letting me share the meeting while Sarah's out, and I really appreciate your patience. Thank you, Kurt, for catching that chance to send a letter and providing a motion, and for Mark, thank you so much for bringing forward, I think, a very lovely amendment, and for your commitment to procedure. I think we hopefully got to a good result there, and yeah, I think I don't think I can claim credit for it. I'm also excited about where we're ending, but I think that had more to do with what was on the agenda than myself. But I'm pleased that we'll probably end a bit before 9. Okay, any other meeting debriefs or calendar checks? Let me ask Devin, would you mind stating, I know I asked you about it, but when will council recess be this year? Kind of when are the, I know we don't have a meeting on the 23rd of May, and then I think council recess is like end of June.
Correct. Yeah, let me pull it up here for you really fast.
This can just be useful for, not that you necessarily want to or need to plan your life around planning board, but depending on plans for the summer, it's sometimes nice to just see when that longer recess will be.
So
While we're waiting, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the recess for planning board specifically is going to be about the from June 29th until July 18th.
Thank you, Devin. And I believe that is reflected in the planning board calendar as well, folks. So that most recent one Devin sent out, you can like see where that is. It may or may not be notated as such, but if you kind of count where we have meetings and don't, council recess will show up on there as well. And Laura, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, nice job, Lisa, chairing the meeting. Thank you so much. Great job for your first meeting chair job. And I second your very insightful comments about Kurt's motion and Mark's amendment to that. I realized that I nearly scuttled it by suggesting we don't need to send a letter. And Mark, I think that was a very elegant solution of how we could get around the problem of having to build consensus on what goes in the letter. Just a nice job all around. And thank you to my colleagues for insisting on correct procedure, and it worked. Hey, it worked.
Thank you, Laura. All right, any final comments before I adjourn? All right, thanks everybody. And again, I don't think we have a meeting next week on the 23rd. Consult your calendar to confirm anything I say, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Lisa.
Bye.